Hey, everybody, I'm so excited to be here. I've been waiting for this conversation for some time with Cherry Torres from Hamilton, which is just really exciting. It's one of my favorite contemporary plays, shows, whatever, productions is the word I'm looking for, that I have seen in a really long time. And there's so many amazing and important messages for all of us, some of which I'm hoping to touch on this afternoon with Cherry. But before we do that, can you, Cherry, introduce yourself? Let us know who you are and what you're about, and then we'll jump into conversation together.
Awesome. Hi. I am so excited to be here. I know we rescheduled this so many times, so we finally made it happen.
Yes, we did. Success.
You success. So I am Cherry Torres. I am currently the Woman Five ensemble member on Broadway that covers the Schuyler Sisters as well. I am from San Juan, Puerto Rico, born and raised. And I am super excited to touch on some of these awesome subjects because I'm all about representation, especially within the performing arts of all forms. I think the beauty about art is that it imitates the life we live, right? So if we're not seeing the world we live in portrayed, it can create a lot of it's just angst, like not
Thanks.
getting to see
Dissonance.
yourself
Yeah.
growing up. You're like, I don't fit, right? So it's able to create community in a form of just feeling seen when you get to see yourself,
Yeah.
and people who look like you on stage.
Yeah, I think that's obviously so important. We need to know that there are other people out there who look like us, sound like us, have
Have
similar
experiences like
experiences
us.
as
Yeah.
us, right? And for so many people, obviously throughout history, but even still today, that's not the case. And they're left wondering, is there something wrong with me that, they're not showing people like me, right? Like, is
Right.
there something that I need to
Right.
be embarrassed about, or that isn't worthy of being represented? And so I'm so glad that there are people like you who take the time to, express um those points of view, but also, you've lived it and you have been able
Yeah.
to find yourself at a certain place in your industry, on your side of the arts,
Yeah.
that is just really, really awesome and impressive, but also really important
Yes.
as
Yeah.
well. And I know you're a part of a whole group of people in that particular production, Hamilton, that is also, representing, that whole part of the world, with
Yeah.
people wanting and needing to be seen and heard. So can you just, you said you're from San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
I say in my Philadelphian accent and not and not, the authentic. But can you just give everyone listening an idea of, how you first came to recognize your interest in the arts and in
Yeah.
acting in particular?
Yeah. So my childhood, I always like to say it was split in two, right? I was in San Juan, Puerto Rico till I was 12. And from 12 on, my family moved to South Florida for a little.
Okay.
And what's I love about my family, it's super special, is they're a musical bunch. Everyone in my family plays an instrument, they're musical, they are either music teachers, background singers, sound engineers, trombone players. So in terms of music and the arts specifically, it felt really natural for me to just gravitate
Right.
towards um, the arts. It just was all around me. It's all I kind of knew. But it wasn't until I was homeschooled for a few years in the transition into moving to Florida because it was a bit of a jarring change,
I'm
right?
sure. Yeah.
And in I think it was the end of seventh grade, we accidentally got a brochure sent to our house of a magnet program. and it was an arts magnet program middle school that was like maybe 45 minutes away from my house, fairly far. And my mom was like, this came here by accident, but I thought maybe you'd be interested in looking at it. And it changed my life. I was like, that is the happiest accident that has happened, you know? So I started middle school in this arts program. I had only maybe taken a few dance lessons. So that was the closest I could kind of get into, because I hadn't taken vocal lessons or anything like that. And at the end of the year, they had, I believe they were doing, I think it was South Pacific or something like that. And I was
Okay.
like, all right, I'll audition. Like, I've auditioned for stuff. Like, I can probably sing a song, and fingers crossed. And I did it, and I have not really, I haven't looked back.
From that point on.
Yeah, getting to marry storytelling and marry kind of my love for why people are the way they are with music. It just felt like the right medium for me to, continue my love for the arts.
Yeah. And then from that point on, did you go on and get a degree in
Yeah,
acting or musical theater or something along those lines?
I actually went to a music school,
Okay.
hilariously enough. I went to Berkeley College of Music and studied voice there. And then I continued taking acting classes until I moved to New York City and continued studying there and auditioning, and went on to do some cruises,
Okay.
traveled,
Okay.
did all the things.
You've done all of the things. Yeah.
All the
I
things.
I mean, I come from a visual arts background.
Yeah.
And the rest of my family, like my extended family and stuff, are all on the performing arts side, so I have no idea like what happened there. But anyway, I come from this like visual arts background, but we're similar in that like we have to kind of do a lot of different things before we end up like where we ultimately hope to land. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you had that experience where you just were taking roles and opportunities wherever they came
Yeah.
up for you, and ultimately
Yeah.
were able to make it to the point that you're at today.
Exactly. Yeah. My kind of journey to where I am was really gradual, and I'm really grateful for it, because I think it gave me cruises gave me the ability to travel
Yeah.
the world and, just grow and learn. And then I went on to do regional, then I went on to do national tour. Then now I'm here in New York City. So
Yeah.
it's been like a step by step
Yeah.
process
Constant
for me.
evolution and growth, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
trusting that this process will lead you to
Yes.
where you will ultimately end up. Is this your first like Broadway stage that you're on? Like, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Congratulations. That's a huge
Thank you.
accomplishment. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. It
It's
felt
really
very, very surreal almost.
right. Right. I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. Well, so you just told us a little bit about how you got to,
Mhm.
being a stage actress, and um, the process that and the steps that you took to get there. But I'm curious about what it was like for you as a little girl, a teenager, a young adult, um, being in the audience, right? And seeing um roles portrayed um in certain ways. Like, what was it like for you as a person of color
Mhm.
to be in the audience, to know that she wants to be an actress, but maybe seeing, maybe not,
Yeah.
roles portrayed in certain ways? Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
For sure. So Puerto Rico is such a diverse, like any Latinx country, right? We have this a bit of an identity crisis, right? Because Latinx is used as kind of an umbrella term to self-identify, and even Puerto Rican. So we have like our heritage, and what happens is, you grow up seeing people of every color, every shape, every body, and I just remember vividly, like even with the telenovelas I saw a lot of whiteness. Whiteness was always in the forefront, you know, and then going on to see like Disney movies, you know, and stuff like that. And eventually I remember, I think it was West Side Story in terms of musicals that I saw it, and I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's it's a whole thing about Puerto Rico? What?
What? Yeah.
So imagine my mind being blown when I realized that 99% of the cast was also white. I was like, this whole time, what? It
Right.
was so confusing and wild to me. And then over time, it was In the Heights that came
Okay.
out. And I think around when I was in college and hoping to transition into moving to New York City to start auditioning, and The Height had just come out. And that was probably the first time that I could see a group of people of every shade that represented the Puerto Rico I know, even if it wasn't in Puerto Rico. And that was probably the most excited I had been to see, you know, like just
Yeah.
a live. I didn't have the money to just kind of come up and watch it, so I would just
Right.
like YouTube videos of every little clip of song that I could find, you know.
Right.
Um, but that was the most striking, just like to be to that's me. That's my childhood. That's like what I saw around me.
Right.
Um,
Right. It was
so
the first time something actually like clicked and felt right in that part of the whole experience of watching theater. Like,
yeah,
you know, even this production that everyone knows as being Puerto Rico and all of this stuff didn't hit that for you because it was revealed that it was just more white
yeah,
people portraying roles that they have no idea of the
right.
experience. But then this one was like, wow, this actually
It felt
represents me. It
authentic.
felt authentic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What do you say that, you know, because it when did In the Heights come out? When was that? When was the
In the Heights came out, I believe it was like 2010,
2010?
2009, 2010
Okay. So we're
era.
like 15ish years ago or something like
Yeah,
that. Maybe I can't really do math, but that sounds right.
yeah, I
So
can't either. So I'm like
we'll just go
15.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like let's just pretend it's 15ish years. You know, would you say that as you know, as those years have gone by, it's become better? Like, do you see the industry changing, or, you know, is there still a really long way to go? What is your take on that now?
I think that there is an ebb and flow. I do think we have long ways to go. But I do, you know, you see steps forward here and there and
Right.
kind of like movements. Um, Something that, you know, tends to happen too when there is a big call of action. And we saw that with the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw
Yeah.
that with, and I think theater, you know, was affected by that as well. So you saw a big call of
Mm.
action, you see movement forward, and then there's years where sometimes you feel like the okay,
The pendulum kind of is swinging kind of
yeah,
the other way again.
yeah. We're such cyclical creatures, humans, right? Like
Yeah.
it fascinates me because you think, wow, like we see of growth as such a linear thing, but then you look back in history and we've
It's
done,
very
you know, we've gone in
winding and
circles.
yeah.
um, but I do have hope because I think those times have given voices to authors, to creators, to performers to bring forth pieces of art that are um, filled with different experiences than just, you know, one sole, you know, perfect doll of an experience Barbie
Right.
situation, you know,
Right.
um, which is exciting because I think it also, you know, we can talk about the performing aspects of it, but it comes from so far. Like it comes from it needs to start with writers, with schools, exposing kids to performing arts and to
Hmm.
writing, to
Right.
from casting directors, management, crew. Like what does your building look like when you walk into it?
Right.
And our
Right.
people being represented there as well.
Right. It's not just about who you see on the stage playing various roles. It's the entire thing from
Yeah.
the very ground floor all the way
Yeah.
up.
Who's producing the shows? Who's producing the shows of color?
Exactly. Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, that's a really big piece that I don't think we yeah, I mean you just said who's producing the shows, and I've heard interviews and and have heard conversations about that topic, right? Like about,
Yeah.
who is funding these shows, who's producing them, who is directing them, as being an issue. But I don't think it's something that, regular people are actually thinking about, right? But
Yeah.
those people have the power, right? They have the decision making power to say yes or no
Exactly.
to everything, right? To all
Exactly.
those things. And so it's really important to not only look at, who's represented on stage, night every night, but who is actually calling the shots to like get that show up in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
that's a really big part of it as well.
Yeah. And for the most part, in case anyone's wondering, it's still mainly white and male.
Yes.
Right. And that is a problem, right? And I say that as somebody who walks into the room with that privilege of being a white male guy, who doesn't like that everything is still white and male. Like it's
Yeah.
just not, it does not represent the world, the community that we all live in.
Exactly.
So you are on Hamilton stage right now,
Yeah.
and that is obviously, I mean, a show that everyone talks about, that everyone has experienced, that everyone raves about, or has an opinion about. um but it is a show that takes what is classically like a white European story and turns it on its head to be fully, for the most part, right, representative of Black and brown and Asian people,
Mm-hmm.
right, on the stage telling that story. How important is that, in terms of like not only conveying history, American history, but also bringing in aspects of American history that we like to kind of put under the
Yeah.
rug or in the cabinet.
I think, I mean, it set a different standard, right, for um, productions that would come after it. I think it created because I think, we as humans, we start getting into, once we find like a habit, like things are the way they are and they're just that way. And for so long, nobody broke the boundaries of theater. And it was just the way it was. Like, we had specific roles that maybe I remember thinking, oh, I can't audition for that because I'm not white. I would never get called in, or like I'll get taken out. And this created just the realization that we're storytellers. We use your imagination. This, even with something that was not fictional, with which was true. I'm like, we were still able to come out and bring you this story, and you were with us, and
Right.
you learned something new, and you learned about grief and empathy and
Yes.
forgiveness
Yes.
and love, and honestly, even just envy and those like
Mm-hmm.
mucky yucky feelings that were like, ooh.
Yeah, they weren't all just the good feelings, right, that we all like to
No.
experience and feel, but the real ones that we probably experience as often, if not more, as human beings, right?
Yes. And how cool to see the founding fathers being viewed and not being romanticized as these perfect people when, it was just a group of people doing the best they could with what we had.
Yeah.
Like Alexander Hamilton was no way perfect.
Right.
George Washington was a no way
No way
perfect.
perfect. Right.
And yeah, I think it's such a special thing to be a part of something that it just changed theater forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Change theater forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a statement right there, right? I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
it's
there's certain shows that I think set a different standard. Like Rent came and it
right.
was revolutionary and it just changed theater and it set a different standard. And those have been kind of piling up. So hopefully
Hopefully it'll
we keep
keep.
moving the pendulum in that direction, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, so we're talking about representation and what representation means in terms of like what we see and what we experience in theater, right? And you brought up the really great points that it can't just be the actors and the people that we see, but also all of the elements and all of the roles that go into it, from the very basic elements to the most complex elements in theater. But we're now talking about Hamilton and how it communicates a well-known, or at least a pretty well-known part of American history,
Yeah.
turns it on its head and represents it in a completely different way that isn't always taught in schools, right?
Yeah.
And isn't really recognized as a bunch of imperfect people doing something, trying to do something that hadn't been done before
Right.
in the world. I think now the way that history is presented on stage through this story, through this production, is even more important given what is happening IRL, in real life, in schools every day with our kids, right? Like
Absolutely.
the whitewashing of everything, and the ignoring or the erasing of
Mm-hmm.
really, really important truths, right? It pretty much demands that the arts and theater take over that responsibility and that mantle of educating our kids and adults, right? What really is going on and has gone on, right? And
Exactly.
what do you have any thoughts on that kind of idea?
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly poignant and crucial in the time we live in, which is actually it's terrifying. It's terrifying to think that in this day and age we are erasing some of the most crucial parts of what makes America America.
Right.
So I'm like, you can't just look within and even as humans, right? If we just focused on the good that we have and none of the healing that we need to do, we would never heal.
Right.
We'll never go forward.
Right.
So how as a country are we supposed to, heal and grow when there's just such a huge amount of people who are just trying to erase that part of history? Like, no, that's not how we do this.
Right.
We have to face it head on.
Right. And unless we,
that's the only
right,
way.
exactly. Unless we pay attention to the infection or the cancer, right? It's just going to stay there and it's going to grow. It's going to connect itself to all of the different things around it. And eventually it's going to just suffocate and kill. And that's a really ugly image to think about. But, when we ignore things, it doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away. It keeps growing.
It keeps growing, right? And I think it was interesting that a few minutes ago you said, we go around in circles and in
We're
cycles,
so cyclical,
right? We're so cyclical. And in another part of my life, I'm a therapist, right? And psychotherapist, and people talk about the same thing over and over and over again, and they got frustrated when they realized that they're doing that. Like, why am I just repeating the same thing over and over again? It's because change is really, really slow, and we have to say the same things over and over and over again in slightly different ways
So
and larger different ways until it clicks, or until
exactly.
it like forces us to make a movement. And I think that
Right.
that can also be said as to why we go around in circles and cycles over and over again.
Right.
And shows like Hamilton, shows like Rent back in the day, right,
Yeah.
were things that were said in different ways throughout the course of time, but took it upon themselves to say it in a
Yeah.
different way, right, that vibrates something
Right.
in a particular way to change the conversation,
Exactly.
in big and small ways,
Yeah.
right? And
It
we need more
represents
of that.
hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
It keeps the, because the moment when you see it only as a cycle, if we didn't take the time to like pay attention to these shows and these pieces that are making statements that are important for us to hear, like they represent hope and
Yeah.
our ability to move forward and take a step, even if it's one.
Even it's
Even
just
if
one
it's one,
step, right?
it's a step further than we were at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
true. Like if we're just paying attention to just the like the ever revolving like door that we just keep going in and out of,
Yeah.
that can become really tiring, can be really
Yes.
frustrating, and it
Yeah.
can start to feel hopeless.
Yeah.
Um, and it's important though that we just don't like say, oh, here we go again, right?
Right.
Here's the same thing. We know this story, we know that what's going to happen, and we're incapable of having any effect on stopping it or reversing it. We have to acknowledge that here it is again. We've seen this before. This time we're going to say something different. This time we're going to do
Yes.
something.
Yes.
We're going to
Because
do
even if
something
it's
different.
one life that you can help, you're doing something that's already doing something.
Right. Right.
It's funny because even I just thought of just theater as a whole, how it is. We do like 8 shows of the same thing every week, every single week.
Right.
I've done this show for 5 years. So
Yeah.
you go through periods of like, ooh, okay, we're doing it, clocking in.
Right.
And it really is,
It's a job in that way, right? Like you're going and
exactly.
doing it. Right.
Keep clocking in, you clock out, and you feel like you're in Groundhog Day, and then, but it is those moments where you get to see people and you get to see, and I had a little girl, I think it was in the stage door, and she was about to audition for Lion King. She's like, my audition's tomorrow, and I'm so excited. I'm so glad I got to see you do this. It's like, all of you guys, you look like me. This is so cool. And she was so vibrant and sweet. And I was like, my God, like, this is it, right?
Right.
This is the whole reason why I want to do this
Right.
every day.
Right.
So similarly, when we have these awesome movements that bring us forward and these shows, and it's knowing and hoping and staying positive about, like, if I can put a little bit, or like write something, create something that can move the movement forward, like that's more than enough. You're doing it. You're
Right.
doing it.
You're doing
You
it.
know,
Right. It's
as
those
tiring as it can be.
it's those little interactions that are actually really, really big, right?
Yeah.
Or it's, it's the audience that you are in front of one night that just like responds in a way that
Yeah.
is different than the one before it, and you really sense that you made an impact, right?
Exactly.
That's what makes those like, you know 7 or 8 clock in clock outs every day doing the same thing,
Absolutely worth it.
running the same plays over and over again, worth it, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I mean, what do you like? So we spoke before we got on here just about, color representation
Yeah.
on stage, right? And we touched upon, you know you and I were talking about like different identities that are
Yeah.
underrepresented. um what would you like to see, or what do you think is important to see in theater, in performing arts, moving forward, that maybe hasn't had that much attention turned on it to say, hey, like, we really need to work in this area.
Yeah.
What would you say would be the thing?
I think I mean, there's so many things. Like, it feels like we're just starting to get our feet wet in it, right? Like, um, neurodiversity, body representation, um, just there are so many stories that have yet to be told, that
Mhm.
are, and I keep like, there's people writing them. They're coming out little by little. And like, I would love to see more of that. As much as I love the old, like, oldies and the
Right.
golden age and the shows that
Oh
come
yeah.
up, and as much as I love the movies that are being turned into shows, there are so many stories, new stories that can be told, that it can not just not just give like representation to people who may feel unseen, but also like create awareness to
Hmm.
people who aren't exposed, or unaware.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that would make me very happy to see.
Yeah, and to be given the platform to
Yes,
actually be seen, right?
yes, exactly.
Right. I mean, there's something to be said about small, intimate theater, small productions, right? Like, that is so, I mean, it's just nice to be an audience member in an intimate setting like that. And also,
Yeah,
I imagine, as an actor, to play to intimate groups of people. But I mean, there is
yes,
something to be said about Broadway or about national tours
absolutely.
that just carry with them a weight, that if
Yeah,
there's something that is like shown on those stages, it must be important, right?
right, right.
um and to let some of these stories that are like kind of kept in the corner and doing really beautiful things and making an impact,
Yeah,
on, small, intimate scale, to be given the opportunity to stand on a stage,
yeah,
um, that is seen by a lot of people and gets the coverage um, that those stages get, like,
yeah.
it would be so amazing.
Important. It's hard too because I think structurally the way theater, just the industry is, especially right now post pandemic, I
Right.
think there is such a priority in, I mean, you have, you need, right, to sell these tickets to recoup. And then what happens? Like, the budgets are usually so over the top for like a spectacle,
Yeah.
that a lot of these stories haven't been put in the forefront because there's just a priority to hope and pray that the show doesn't open and close within
Right. Well, it's a
a
risk.
week.
It's a risk.
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks to the producers and all the decision makers, right?
Yeah.
Who are taking a risk with their finances and
Yeah.
saying, yeah, I think this thing has legs, right?
That's
And
where it's like, it's so struck. And because even like just the cost of the theaters, the cost of the sets, like,
Mhm.
how is there no way to like
Figure that out. Why does it all? Yeah.
figure this out? But it's like structurally unsound at the
Right.
moment.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah. Everything is kind of, well, I mean, that's interesting. And to bring up that, like, things are still trying to find their way back after
yeah,
being like just annihilated over the past, you know 3 or 4 years now,
years.
right?
Yeah.
Like, what are you seeing that it is very different still from
Yeah.
pre-pandemic stuff? Do you think it will ever think it's
Significantly.
forever changed the way it is?
I I don't know. I definitely see a big change in the way. I mean, how many shows within the past few years we've had so many like amazing brand new shows come
Right.
up and open and close
And just close.
so quickly. Um, I don't know how it can be fixed because, like, again, I feel like it's the foundation, it's the roots, the structure.
Hmm.
So how far do we need to go to make sure? But it's like, unless you are a Wicked, a Hamilton, a Lion King,
Right.
um, it's
That's hard to
scary.
keep them sustained.
It's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like the entire structure just needs to come down and be rebuilt,
Yes.
right? Like, we're
Yes.
not, they're doing patchwork to it. They're kind of like
Yes.
propping it up with with different things so that it doesn't like
Band-aid, band-aid,
buckle,
band-aid.
right? Yeah, band-aiding it.
It's like,
But it's just wobbly, and yeah, like the whole thing needs to, and how, that's scary to say, like, oh my God, this whole structure that has been in place forever is now not sustaining itself or able to
right.
be sustained. What's going to become of it? But how amazing could it be to just like dismantle it and rebuild it to be something that
Exactly.
works for today's world, right?
Exactly.
Because patrons aren't coming back in the same way that they were, right? Like
Of course.
audiences are not the same. And
I mean, the expense alone, like I I used to say, because a show like Hamilton, who is all about representation, like it's
right,
unfortunate, it's
there,
expensive.
yeah,
It's an expensive show. Before
right,
I was in it, I couldn't afford to see it.
right,
You
right.
know?
So you figured out a way to see it. I just have to get a job,
You're like,
and
I
then
guess I need to audition
then I
until I
can
get
see
it
it every day.
every day for 5 years.
Right,
Truly, it's definitely like it's the foundation of it. It's right now. It's not right. It's not
right,
sound, and
right,
it's not sustainable.
right.
Not sustainable because if patrons aren't coming back because theater is too expensive, shows are closing. What do we
Mm-hmm.
have to do then
Mm-hmm.
to make it accessible, not just for a few, but for
But for
everyone?
everyone. Yeah. Well, that's a question about the society and culture in general, right? But I think
Mm-hmm.
definitely when we're thinking about shows like Hamilton, um, I know that was a criticism early on, right? I mean, like you had
Yeah,
to, I don't, do they, is it still like a lottery and stuff, or is that all kind of
yeah.
gone away? It's still
They
lottery.
still have the lottery. Yeah.
Wow. Like that is just like, I mean, it's great that they have it, but why do they have to have it?
Right. Right.
Like,
How do we bridge that gap? Like, you
right,
know, they
right.
do. I believe they do the Edgehams through
Okay.
the Gilbert Lerman Institute, which brings in a bunch of kids from different communities, which is always super exciting to see because that's the energy you feel performing for high school and middle school kids is like nothing else. They're just so receptive and happy to be there
Right,
and with you at every turn.
right,
Um, they're some of my favorite shows to do.
right,
But yeah, for the general public, then how do we bridge that gap?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a fun conversation. I'm so glad that we were able to have it.
Me
And
too.
you and I just decided that the entire theater industry just needs to be dismantled and
And
built back
rebuilt.
up. And then
Yeah.
everything will be awesome and perfect, right? That's the way this is
Yeah.
all done, right?
That's
Okay.
it.
All right. Well, there you go, everybody. So stay tuned. We're gonna like we're just redoing everything. But no, seriously, this has been such a great conversation. Um, talking about such important things from the perspective of someone who lives it and sees it from all different angles, um, every day for her entire life. This was just a really special thing for everyone. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad I got to be a part of it. This is
Awesome.
awesome.
You're welcome. Well, thank you. Everybody, this has been the Bold Creatives Collective podcast. I'm so glad that you were able to join Cherry and I today, and I look forward to the next episode. I'll see you all soon.